Glad we don't have to deal with this shit. Let's keep smoking our fancy cigar. Howdy to all 76 now badass motherfuckers of this tribe, and to anybody new watching. Today I want to discuss with you guys central banking. Is it corrupt, or is it just misunderstood? Before we get into that though, let's cue intro. Of course, many of you probably know that the primary functions of banking is that of a place to where people can store their gold, money, etc. in a place outside of their home. In addition to, lending out money to said people, often with interest on top of it to, make their money's worth back, or what we call loans. One can see, however, how having all of this control over money and that power could potentially lead people, governments, etc., to act a certain way or to promote a certain agenda, like hoarding wealth for themselves and their family, or even going to the lengths of manipulating the flow of currency, specifically for business/financial interests, purely out of greed. Now, what are some habits or bad habits engraved in the history of banking and or presently? So the first one would be bank runs. This came from when goldsmiths would loan out more receipts than what they actually had in gold. So basically, all these people would be like, oh, hey, can I get, this receipt for this much? Oh, yeah, here, you can have this receipt. There you go. And in actuality, they didn't have that. Now, this was eventually fixed, but you can kind of see where this would cause a lot of people to have large amounts of panic or upheave around this, considering the fact that they trusted these people with their finances, right? Over time, a lot of these banks/goldsmiths did this intentionally and then dipped at the soonest available opportunity to, just get away with all that wealth that they had accumulated from average everyday people. And naturally, people would be pissed off. Wait, you mean that the glorious, honorable banking systems that we know and love today have something that shitty in their past? And there are people in that system that still do it today? Nah, they wouldn't do that. They have so much of our money, and why would they ever do that? They never want to take all of our money. Central banks were eventually made as the, in quote, solution to this problem. Individual banks could then allocate their money to a bank of their own, for which they could use to make withdrawals later, so bank runs would be less likely to happen. Now, a quick point, with all that money going to one place and being centralized, isn't it kind of hard to not be able to see how that could be abused? Sort of like power. This created one currency base eventually for everyone to use, advancing trade significantly, which is really good. Then there's also the fact of the matter to mention that most people, or most societies and civilizations today, use this form of currency, whether it's from, the US dollar to euros to pesos, etc. That form of, universal currency within a country is extremely helpful, instead of, having two separate types of US dollars and a peso alternative in the United States, making three different currencies, which makes things a lot more difficult and harder to work with. Whereas, just with the one, it's so much easier because you only have to deal with one type of currency, which makes counting and math and everything so much simpler. However, there's been this sort of issue called money laundering. Every year, over 2 to 5% of the global GDP, or $800 billion to $2 trillion, is laundered around the world each year. Isn't that crazy? That's a fuckload of money. Like, goddamn. A lot of us can't even imagine how much that actually is. Wow. Research has shown that this is done through a practice called mirror trading. Now, what is the definition, you might ask? Replicating trades in your account by linking it to another account managed by someone who you believe is a savvy investor, or in other words, a very knowledgeable investor. Also, for those of you who don't know, GDP is the gross domestic product, which is a measurement that seeks to capture a country's economic output. Countries with larger GDPs, like America, Europe, China, etc., often have a greater amounts of goods and services generated within them, which, obviously comes with a higher standard of living. This is most often used to measure socioeconomic growth. Now, a lot of people have argued that this shouldn't be done, as in you shouldn't, use that as a way to determine how successful a society is going to be, but others are the exact opposite. Now, many banks, especially large ones, have investors that want a return on investment, or as many places call it, an ROI. Now, according to one of BuzzFeed's investigative journalists, Daniel Draper, a lot of these banks like JP Morgan, Chase, etc., when they see something shady happening in their account, or shady money, they have to decide if they want to make less money and drop the client, or, in quote, should we just file a report then see if the authorities/police do anything with it, just continuing the relationship with the client. Seems kind of messed up, doesn't it? All right then, we just file a report with authorities and, let them take care of it. Until then, just keep pumping that money. More money to be made. Can't afford to lose any bit of money. This makes it pretty easy to get away with these shady dealings. Now, you would think that they'd have some form of regulators to handle this stuff and report these things to the authorities if needed, right? Like if it's fraud, several violations, threats, etc., etc. Seems kind of too loosey-goosey or carefree, right? Oh well, we filed a report, so it's no longer our problem, right? Get me that cigar. We'll, smoke this shit off. Glad we don't have to deal with this shit. Let's keep smoking our fancy cigar. Now, these regulators aren't being strict enough with the policyholders, which are the banks, allowing these very sus transactions to continue happening. Banks plus regulators should be very strict with these situations, simply just because it's part of their job, especially the regulators. That's their whole job. Now, according to DW News, the amount of money that has left Africa through illicit financial transactions, meaning corruption, parking money in tax havens, and so on, more than equals what Africa has received in development aid over the past 50 years. It's really weird, right? Africa is also the poorest continent in the world, according to SOS-USA.org. It is estimated that Africa has received more than $1 trillion during the last 50 years. Despite continuous aid to African countries, some of them became worse off than they were in the early 1960s. Now, generally, financial aid to another country is supposed to be temporary. Like, after a natural disaster or something, they're not supposed to go on for very long. This is especially bad when the government or group is corrupt or just bad at allocating the financial aid given to them. This can also happen with just distribution of resources as well too. Very true with many poor countries, as corruption is often found in them. Why do you think all this has happened in Africa? It's because it has many poor countries with corrupt officials who receive financial aid every year. And apparently that's somewhere to like $1 billion roughly. It's fairly easy for dictators, terrorists, authoritarians, etc. to thrive like this. Meanwhile, the people themselves suffer, especially with mirror trading and the lack of regulation that goes on. Now, before you start thinking that it's just all these regulators and everything else, it's not really entirely their fault neither. They're extremely understaffed. Now, Daniel Draper from BuzzFeed said that they have 270 employees but get millions of reports every year. It's damn near impossible to catch everything in this way. In this situation, you would argue that banks would need to take responsibility and help out. One could argue, though, that there are a lot of banks slash regulators who are participating in this illicit mirror trading that has become such a problem. There's too much of a loophole for a lot of corruption not to be involved in this. Many nefarious groups abuse the shit out of these situations and flaws in the banking system, which in turn often has some form of connection to the governments. Boss, all these transactions are looking pretty suspicious. What should we do about it? There's multiple ones of them from a lot of people with lots of money. And don't worry about it. We don't even have enough staff to take care of these problems. So why the fuck should we worry about it? Give it to the authorities. Money laundering schemes and events like these are often connected to things like sex trafficking, drug cartels, slavery, etc., which then oftentimes has a connection to one of the governments, or many of them. The US is also the protector slash big helper of the world too, so connect the dots of probability there. Time and time again, throughout the history of central banking, it has shown that there has been a decent amount of connection to corruption within its own system and to governments, big corporations, etc. For instance, Donald Trump, the former US president, has had connections to the unscrupulous German banking system known as Deutsche Bank that time and time again has been ridiculed, slammed, and downgraded in business because of its malpractices. That's just one of the many messed up sort of connections that there are to the US and this form of corruption. Another sort of connection that you could argue that's messed up is the one between the Wuhan Institute of Virology in the United States, with the amount of funding that's been sent there, considering the fact that the Wuhan Institute of Virology does a lot of gain-of-function research, which is outlawed in the United States, by the way, because it can potentially lead to a pandemic-level threat because of the genetic mutations that would occur. Is the modern-day central banking system corrupt and or very flawed? Let me know what you guys think in the comments section down below. I'd love to hear what y'all have to say about this. Did any of you guys make it to the end of this video? If you guys did, let me know in the comment section down below by typing laundering. So let me know that you guys are part of the 100% club. And that's going to be it for us today. If you guys did enjoy, please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. It helps us get farther up in that YouTube algorithm and also helps to, let people know that there's no problem with thinking differently, and also to help expose a little bit more of those hidden truths that are out there. Now, if you guys want more of an interactive experience, come join us on stream Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 8:30 to 10:30 p.m. Central Time. Great ass time, nice and chill. As usual, though, my dudes, please don't forget to, live long and prosper, take care and peace, and keep it 1,000,000% real. I'll see you guys on the flip side.